Welcome to part 3 of the White House farm murder case. We ended last episode, part 2, with the case in favor of Jeremy Bamber being guilty of murder as he was convicted. Today, in part 3, we're going to go through the many threads of evidence that may indicate otherwise, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, welcome to the Weird World Podcast. I'm Carrie.
I'm Dean.
And
I just teased what we're going to do. I'm not going to do a recap here. Hopefully this is part 1 and 2 of the White House farm murders.
Because why would you listen to this one if you didn't
that'd be
listen?
weird. That'd be weird. You know what? I'm just going to do part 3 and go straight to the chase. So we ended, as I mentioned, by detailing some of the reasons, some of the strong evidence that Jeremy Bamber was indeed guilty as he was convicted of murdering his entire family.
Yeah. Not hugely overwhelming evidence.
It was not. Today, that's for the listeners to decide, though, Carrie. Let's not try to bias anybody. Today, we're going to...
Well, they listened. They know. I'm not
Okay, all right.
biasing anybody.
Well, today we're going to go the way, and we're going to go through, at some length, I'm not going to lie, we're going to go through the case in favor of Jeremy possibly being actually innocent of the crime that he was convicted of, and to this day still is in prison in England for this crime.
Yeah.
So these, I'm going to go real quick. What these threads of evidence are going to cover the possibility that there were some phone calls from inside the house during the standoff when Jeremy, of course, would have been with the police. The evidence surrounded the silencer, which is critical. The boot flowers story, that was the family, the relatives of Jeremy and their whole...
Yeah, I'm a little suspicious of them.
And of course, we're going to talk about their motives, perhaps. Then we're going to talk about the character of Sheila Bamber, the alternative, the initial suspect in a murder-suicide. And then we're going to talk about the nature of Julia Mugford's story that was absolutely critical to Jeremy Bamber being convicted. And finally, we're going to end up with just a quick rundown, some generalized holes or problems with the prosecution's case to wrap it up. And then we're going to, I'll ask your opinion, and I'll kind of, convey what I think probably happened. So, first, calls from inside the house. There was the potential for 2 calls from White House Farm that morning. We know that Neville called Jeremy, or at least Jeremy says, the police say he did not. Jeremy says that Neville, his father, called Jeremy to say, Sheila's gone nuts.
Right.
Please, come help.
So wait, you just said the police say
The
Jeremy
the
did not get that
prosecution
call.
said there was no call, that he made it up.
Do they... And what?
Remember, we have no, British Telecom has no records of local calls, so we can't prove that there were any calls that night coming from the White House farm.
But so the prosecution can't prove that there weren't?
No, it cannot.
Okay.
For sure. They just said, oh, he's lying.
Okay.
So, but, we put that in kind of the ambiguous column because there's so much confusion about how many calls there were and what the calls were, and there still is, and there always will be. But if there were 2 calls, it would very strongly argue in favor of Jeremy's innocence. So we don't know. So it's possible that there were multiple calls from inside the White House farm. Here's another thing that's very suggestive about the phone calls that morning. There may have been one that was much later. An item in Scotland Yard's records indicates that a 999 call came from the White House farm at 6:09 a.m. This would have been hours after Jeremy had been with the police outside, set up behind the house in the barn as they awaited to break into the house.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, weren't they there, but they hadn't entered the house yet?
No, they had not. Remember, they tried to 7:30. I don't think they actually entered the house till 7:54. So they were there for hours. They were from about 3:30 to about 7:30 before they said, let's go in, and almost 8 o'clock before they actually entered the house. So if there was a call from 6:09 from the farmhouse, it's just a record. It's just an item in Scotland Yard's record detailing the case. It said, something about call from the White House farm at 6:09 a.m.
Here's my thing. Even the police department's phone records don't seem very...
No, they don't. They really don't.
Definitive.
I know. There's a lot of questioning.
It's strange.
It's very strange. So the local police did investigate this supposed call, and the Essex police said they found no record of any such call.
Yeah.
This investigation said, no, we didn't find a call at 6:09 by the Essex police. It was signed by an officer of the Essex police named Nicholas Milbank. And it said, Nicholas Milbank had been monitoring that line. It remained open, and he heard nothing on that until the police raided the farmhouse. Remember, the line was open, the phone was off the hook.
Right.
Milbank's name on the signature line of this report was typed. Journalist Heidi Blake tracked down Milbank for her New York article, and he was still with the Essex police. He told Blake that, contrary to the report, he did remember a 999 call coming from the farmhouse at 6:09 in the morning. When she told him the report that said, no, there wasn't such a thing, and that his name was typed on it, he was floored. He said he had never made any such report. He had nothing to do with it.
Okay. Really? How does he remember this now? B.
He would remember investigating whether there's a call 609
then what was
saying
the call?
there wasn't.
If he remembers the call, what was the call?
He remembers that a 999 call came in.
How? How do you remember that?
Because he was an Essex officer at the time and part of the case.
And he was monitoring that phone line, you said. So he answered that phone?
No, he didn't. He didn't answer the 99 call. I don't know, Carrie.
I know that's my question. See, I don't believe somebody with a 30-year-old or however many decades it was.
Okay.
Saying now they remember.
You don't think he'd know if he had conducted an investigation into this call and signed it when it typed? You don't think he'd remember that? You don't think he'd say, I had nothing to do with that record, that investigation, someone faked my name. You don't think he'd remember that?
Possibly not. How many things do police officers investigate in multiple decades?
In the biggest case of his life by far.
I mean, I don't know. I would need to know. I would need to ask him some questions myself.
Yes. Okay. There was one other telephone issue. The prosecution claimed that because the phone in the kitchen had no blood on it and Neville was bloody, this negated Neville having called Jeremy to say that Sheila was acting crazy. That was an important point in the prosecution case. But of course, the obvious counter to that is if Neville had just killed his whole family, he'd probably be bloody too, theoretically. He'd remember many of those shots were at contact shots, and they're all at close range. So wouldn't he have been kind of a bloody mess as well? So, the argument is that the lack of blood in the phone is kind of neither here nor there. So those are a couple of things that have to do with phone calls and the phone. Now we're going to go on to the evidence around the silencer. The silencer that may or may not have been attached to the murder rifle was, as we know, absolutely crucial to the case. The prosecution forensic witnesses said that the blood that was found in the silencer was Sheila's for sure. They said if Sheila had been attempting suicide and realized the silencer made the weapon too long, she would have unscrewed the silencer, remember, and laid it next to her. And the fact that it was, quote, hidden back in its place in the gun closet was proof that Jeremy had murdered her. So let's start with the blood. Later analyses from forensic experts hired by Jeremy's lawyers showed that there was absolutely no certainty whatsoever that the blood on the silencer was Sheila's, or even that it was so-called backspatter, as the prosecution forensic experts said, from a close contact wound. There's no clear indication that was true, they argue. All they really know, in truth, is that it was Sheila's blood type. There was no DNA testing of the blood whatsoever.
Right.
Experts admitted it could have been a mixture of June and Neville's blood, as likely as Sheila's.
Why?
There's just no certainty about what. I don't know whether that's a blood type thing. It's just what this was expert witnesses that would later testify in later appeals cases. Actually, at the time, I believe I may be screwing that up, but at the time, there was a lot of uncertainty, and that the prosecution witness portrayed it as a certainty. And we'll see in a second here how the judge.
Which I don't like doing that, but also the end result is, if I was on the jury, I would just have to disregard that as evidence of anything.
Yeah. And this was maybe the most this was by far the most critical physical evidence. By far was the silencer and the blood.
Yeah.
The other part was Julia Mugford's story, but we'll just get to it in a bit. So defense forensic experts would argue that the prosecution witnesses grossly overstated the certainty of their conclusion, given the test of the time, and that the judge had instructed the jury that the blood was Sheila's. Later tests by the defense indicated that the blood was more likely June's. Now, these are defense witnesses. Take it for what it's worth.
I take that for worth even less. But
I don't know if I take it for less in this case.
Well, here's the thing. If a prosecution lab, or a lab, whatever, tests it and determines the blood type, I don't think that's a super difficult test to do.
It's not. That's been around for decades, even before 1985.
So then it's the process. So then it's the defense's job to poke holes in that, and their hole is going to be, well, it could have been June's. It could have been.
Yeah.
So
although I don't have a catalog of whose blood type was the same.
Is that first lab? Well, we determined that it couldn't have been the same as June's because then they wouldn't know if it was Sheila's or June's.
Correct.
And because Sheila's adopted,
I
they
think,
very well could be, dad could be A,
yes,
mom could be O, and she could be AB. And
I think they were challenging the blood type thing at all completely. It was that it was possibly a mixture of blood, and it was just impossible to tell whose blood it was or even what blood type it was. That's what they're challenging.
I know, but so that's what I'm saying. The simple blood test to determine type is a simple blood test. So
if there's a mixture of blood, it's going to be fouled up.
It's
going to be difficult to determine if there's a mixture of blood.
Lab A, the prosecution's lab, should get the same result. That's my issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay,
that's what I'm saying. You just throw everything out, and you can't believe anybody who ever says anything in a court of law.
So later, though, claiming that they were not aware of the ongoing appeals by Jeremy's defense team. I mean, he's still appealing to this day.
Yeah.
But I think it was 1996, the Essex police destroyed almost all the evidence, including all the blood evidence, because they said, "Oh, we didn't know there were ongoing appeals." This is,
that's
the
terrible.
most famous case in England. Is almost certainly a lie. And of course, this was just as DNA testing that was becoming more sophisticated was occurring and was being developed. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah. Although, would anything of Sheila's exist to compare it to?
Her blood. The blood and the signs would be able to be DNA analyzed, and we could have told.
You have to have something to compare it to, Dean.
Oh, her. That's a good question. I don't know.
Her children were also killed, so.
That's true. I don't know. Presumably. She had family. We know exactly who her parents were.
We do?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
We know who both their parents were.
Yeah, that's
Jeremy
true.
and Sheila. So it's potentially they likely could have compared it to her family or compared it to blood from evidence that did remain. I don't know if anything remained or not.
Yeah, that's terrible. A case where there's no statute of limitations and stuff, they definitely should not ever.
Especially, as I say, this is the mid-90s now when DNA is starting to become a thing.
Yeah.
So beyond whose blood was on the silencer is the question of how it got there. Not only was the silencer not discovered by the police, it was found by the Boot Flowers, a family branch that did not like Jeremy and, as we will see, may have been highly motivated to get at Jeremy. It was then in possession of the family for at least 2 days before it was retrieved by a detective. That detective, Stan Jones, being someone who was very, very anti-Jeremy, had already determined in his mind that Jeremy was the murderer and was guilty. So Jeffrey Rivlin, he was Jeremy's attorney, he believed that there was a real good chance the blood specks had been planted. I know anytime the defense says, oh, the police planted it, you should always raise a red flag. But in this case, give it some thought for a second. The very least, he said there was no chain of command of the silencer whatsoever, that interested parties had possession of it, and that those interested parties did have the means to plant the evidence. This is because during one of Ann Eaton's, she was the cousin, a boot flower. She was the one who kind of faked friendship with Jeremy, who she didn't like. And she would go and search the farmhouse. But she had keys to the farmhouse where the murders took place. And during one of those searches at the farmhouse, she had noticed a pair of bloodied underwear soaking in a tub of water that we mentioned, I believe, in part 2. She surmised that Sheila had been menstruating, which is very likely true. But I don't know. Speculation. Could this have sparked an idea in her or the Boot Flowers or even Detective Stan Jones that they have Sheila's blood and they have Sheila's blood, they have the silencer in their possession for 2 days before Stan Jones got it, and then Stan Jones has it in his personal possession, by the way, not in the evidence lockup, which should be for the next almost 2 weeks. So,
well, if the underwear are soaking in water, there's no way you're getting blood out of it to be visible on
I don't know.
Well, I do because I've soaked plenty of.
I'd like to not talk about that topic.
Soaked underwear in water.
Let's move on. Anytime.
It's fact of life, Dean.
I mean, like I said, anytime the go-to is the police planted it, you should be suspicious. But in this case, the circumstances around the silencer, and let's be honest, the history of the British police during this period, is not
looking
good.
too good.
There's many cases where they clearly planted evidence, especially prominent cases like this. So it makes this claim kind of within the pale in my mind. At the very least, the silencer evidence should have been met with skepticism. There's all those questions we just brought up were not presented to the jury in an honest fashion, for sure. When the jury sent a note to Judge Drake asking if the blood on the silencer was a, quote, perfect match with Sheila's, the judge's answer was that the blood did not match anyone else. This was a lie. Investigators had already knew that Robert Bootflyer, for instance, had Sheila's blood type. So saying that is just a flat lie. But it also, that sounds to me purposefully misleading. He didn't really answer the actual question. The jury then, that was the last question they asked, right?
Yeah.
21 minutes later, the jury said, we've reached a verdict.
Yeah. And see, I understand that based on my original issue with the whole blood test thing. If she's the only one in the house with O-type blood, then you can deduce it's more than likely her blood.
Yeah. Yes, I think we should drop the whole type thing.
Yeah.
Because I think there's huge questions in
I know.
if they can determine even type, let alone anything
But I think
else.
that's where the judge was. I think that's where the judge was coming from.
The judge, he was clearly overstepping because he knew what he was saying was not true, and I think he knew he was not really answering that question.
Because you can't
The answer
say.
should have been just a simple no.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
not certainty of that,
Yeah.
and he said quite the opposite. So then we have the argument that Sheila would have simply laid the silencer next to her when she shot herself if she had discovered it made the rifle too long, and thus the silencer is found in the gun cupboard, and that meant Jeremy had done it. There's lots of holes in this. First, the same can be said for Jeremy. If he had suddenly realized that the silencer made the weapon too long to frame Sheila for killing herself, why in the hell would he put it back in the gun cupboard? He would have presumably unscrewed it and laid it down to her side, making it look like she had unscrewed it and laid it down. Why would he have done anything
I don't know.
different?
Maybe he unscrewed it, stuck it in his pocket, and realized it when he was downstairs.
So he's
he
smart
put
enough
it in the cupboard.
Smart enough to realize that the silencer ruins his frame up thing, but he's dumb enough to put it back in the gun cupboard, which is exactly where it belonged. Which is exactly where it was stored.
But also maybe he didn't realize there was evidence on it. And then that way it would be like it was never on the gun to begin with.
He's trying to frame Sheila for suicide. He's going to lay it down next to her. He'd be an idiot to put it in his pocket and put it back in the cupboard. And then he's now taken out his pocket. Oh, no. And he puts it in the cupboard? No. He goes back upstairs and puts it next to Sheila's body. If he's smart enough to know the silencer makes his suicide frame not work, he's smart enough to know he shouldn't put it in the gun cupboard. That's saying he's really smart in one way and really dumb 10 seconds later.
I mean, that doesn't bother me all that
It's
much.
not, but it's another hole. It doesn't make any sense. It kind of negates this idea that, well, it would have been in next to her if Sheila had done it. I say the same for Jeremy if he had done it, is what I'd argue. So just flip it and say, well, maybe she did. You could say that, couldn't you? Maybe she did go and put it in the gun cupboard and then went back up to kill herself. Who knows? Maybe she took it off before she even went upstairs to kill herself. You can say the same for that. There's no innate logic to it in the way the prosecution presented it. And here's the other thing. Quote, hidden in the gun closet? So you mean the place that it was always kept? Why the hell would he put it there? That makes no sense to have put it there. If it was something he was worried about, he would have destroyed it, taken it away, got rid of it, thrown it in a pond. Who knows? It's more likely...
Criminals get caught because they do stupid things all the time.
Of course they do. But the fact that it was in the gun closet, to me, strongly indicates that it had been in the gun closet the entire time, and that's indeed where it was stored. Other people, Jeremy would say, and logic makes sense, the boot flyers would say, oh, the silencer was always on the rifle. Jeremy said, of course it wasn't. It didn't fit its case when you had the silencer on. So you always stored the rifle usually in its case, and you stored the silencer off the rifle because it couldn't fit. So that, to me, just look at the logic of that. One has logic, the other does not.
Do they always store the rifle in its case?
I don't know, but
Well,
logically they would.
If they didn't, then it wouldn't matter.
No, it wouldn't, but logically they would.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just because I don't know doesn't mean
Sure.
you're right. Almost certainly. I would argue almost certainly they did. Otherwise, why have a gun case? right? If it had a case for it, likely they would have stored it in the case. I don't know. I can't say that for a certainty, but that seems likely. That's what Jeremy said. I know he's motivated why he said that, but that's what he said. There's no one else alive who could prove that. So what's more, the police say they had searched the gun closet the day of the event. Remember, it wasn't found for 3 more days by David Bootflower. And when he found it, he would say, "Oh, I saw it sticking out of a box of ammunition," which to me says it was in plain sight. So the police open the gun closet and they don't see a critical piece of evidence sticking out of a box, not hidden anywhere. He was stupid to have not said it was hidden somewhere, but he said it was sticking out. Obviously easily discoverable in any kind of cursory search. So
but then I do have a question though.
Yes.
Did Sheila's husband have to answer any questions? Was he?
He was gone.
Did he? No, but I mean, he presumably has spent a fair amount of time in that house, and he might have some knowledge. Like you said, no, we don't have anybody to ask.
I don't think he did spend that time in the house.
Okay.
He was persona non grata. Remember, they had a relationship. He got her pregnant before they got married. They were not fans of Colin Caffell.
Okay.
So I
don't
know if he'd ever been
They
to that
were
house.
married for some years.
I know.
And
yeah. But remember, she didn't get along with her parents,
so
and they didn't like
visit a
him.
lot.
I would not be surprised if he'd never been in the house in his life.
Okay. Well, that's
Or
probably
inside
not
the
true.
house. Remember, he dropped off the kids that day. They weren't married very long. So, and she was living in London the entire time.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me at all that he had never been to the house.
Because I mean, he was pretty much absent from this entire thing.
Mm-hmm. It at least opens up the possibility, though, that the silencer was put in that gun closet after the fact, or just simply, allegedly found there after the fact. But if the police didn't see it and he did, where was the silencer? I don't know. I don't know the answer. But the Bootflowers apparently found it and presented it as evidence and gave it to the police a couple days later. So, again, we've kind of another chink in the armor of using the silencer as critical evidence.
Yeah.
The silencer also supposedly had this, remember the flecks of red paint on it, said by the prosecution to be there because Jeremy had fought with his father over the gun and he had knocked against and scraped against that red mantelpiece over the hearth. So again, I just remind you, remember who had possession of the silencer before the police, the Bootflowers. So let's take a closer look at that family and their relationship to this critical piece of evidence. Ann Eaton wrote some notes to herself before she spoke with the police on August 9, about 3 days later. 2 days after, the end of it. Mm-hmm. August 9th was the day before they said that the Bootflowers found the silencer in the farmhouse.
Okay.
One of her notes said, quote, "Look at silencer, blood?" End quote. This is before they claimed to have found the silencer in the gun closet.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. The next day, David Bootflower, her brother, discovers the silencer. The family had summoned the farm secretary, Barbara Wilson, into the house right before David found the silencer in the gun closet. Even Ann Eaton felt Barbara Wilson would say later that she kind of felt the scene was staged for her, and she didn't like Jeremy. She and Jeremy didn't get along.
Yeah.
So even Barbara Wilson thought that looked fishy.
Right.
So then, once in possession of the silencer, Detective Stan Jones, who they gave it to, who again was their ally in this case against Jeremy, he neglected to enter the silencer into the case records or to store it appropriately, and he simply locked it up in a desk drawer.
Wow.
That's 101. Even in 1985, that's phenomenally dumb. By the way, note that this makes the silencer very handy for him to have possession of and to do what he would with it. So for 17 days, there was no actual record of where the silencer was. Detective Jones claimed to have found no fingerprints on the silencer whatsoever. He did some fingerprint testing during this period of the silencer, and he said there weren't any fingerprints on it at all. It's interesting because we know multiple Bootflowers had handled it without any gloves on, for sure.
Right.
And that there was no Jeremy prints is kind of telling. But of course, he could have worn gloves. Sure, that's possible, but that's interesting that he found no claimed to have found no prints. At the very least, if Jeremy had worn gloves, something like that, he should have found boot flower fingerprints.
Right.
It's interesting that he said he did not.
Yeah.
During this period, with easy access, where Stan Jones had very easy access to the silencer, this critical piece of evidence, Jones had gone with the boot flowers back to the farmhouse. Ostensibly, this was to see if they could match scratches and paint to the mantelpiece and take a paint sample from that. Mm-hmm. But in sources I've read, it says that they possibly took the silencer with them to the farmhouse on that day. It was a few days after he had been in possession of it. Later, City of London police would ask Andy Eaton if during this time they used the silencer to scratch the mantle and put those. And she, of course, said no. But here's the obvious question. Why were they asking that?
Yeah.
They had to be suspicious that that is what happened.
Yeah.
So it appears as if there's suspicion, even in the other parts of law enforcement, about what was going on with the Essex police up there in this really prominent case.
Was there evidence on the mantle of...
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. Sometime I'll say this. There were scratches on the mantle that they said, okay, that's where the silencer in this battle scratched and scuffed up the mantle. We'll get to how that worked out in real life in a bit. Sometime later, after the silencer was properly stored, finally, a police forensic worker went in and to get it to do, I'm not sure what for, but he found a piece of tape stuck to the silencer. This tape had multicolored paint flecks on it, not just red, multicolored, red, blue, green, white, and gray. These multicolored samples were a perfect match for the Bamber's mantle. That is, it was not just red, it had multiple colors on it. And so remember, they made a lot of the red because that's what the boot flowers said had. They saw red blood and they saw red paint. Uh-huh. After the forensic techs were asked, Stan Jones, what's going on here? Why is this tape? Why is there multicolored paint flecks on here? We thought they were just red. They were told that Detective Cook, Ron Cook, had placed the tape there to protect the initial red paint residue during the fingerprint test that they had conducted. The problem was that the records from the initial examination of the silencer only mentioned red. There were no multicolored flakes of any other paint except red paint on it when it was first brought in and tested. So where did those multicolored paint flecks? The surmise, anyway, from the defense is that when they were scuffing it up, they got some more than they bargained for, I guess. I don't know, but the implication is that the silencer must have been in contact with the Bamber's multicolored mantle after it was initially examined once in the possession of the police. That's where it got the multicolor. If they just had red when it was first examined by the police, and then weeks later it was examined again and it had this multicolored flecks on it, that implies that it got more paint flecks somewhere else somehow, and those multicolored paint flecks matched the mantle. That implies it was in contact with the mantle after the police already had possession of it. That's pretty damning evidence.
It's really hard to picture. How is this mantle painted 5 different colors?
I don't know. That's hard. That is true.
And how big are the paint flecks?
Small.
On the exactly. So it might be easy to not see gray and white. Well, because what color is a silencer? It's probably metal, right? Yeah. So that's going to blend in more so than maybe red. I don't know. I would have to see it to be able to determine how big of a bombshell this is.
Sure, but it's certainly a strong implication that it had got something. It had got additional paint flecks on it after the police handled it. I can't stress that enough. After the police had first cataloged it.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe only the red was initially visible.
That'd be weird.
That's why I'm saying.
If it's black, red on black is the least visible of those colors.
You'd have to see it to see what.
Sure. For sure. But the idea, the implication is the police used it to scrape the silencer on the mantle.
Right. Sure.
And that,
Yeah.
It's not a certainty, but it's another major blow to this evidence.
Well, I mean, the biggest blow is the whole chain of custody thing. And
why would he keep it? He kept it handy in his desk. Why?
Yeah.
Because he knew he was going to do what he did.
Yeah.
Which was manufacture evidence. So let's go on to the Boot Flowers story. The Boot Flowers swayed the case with their speculations and their suspicions. They essentially instilled, here's what happened was conveyed to folks in the police force, and some of those folks bought into it. Remember, the Taft Jones did not, but Stan Jones and some others did. Their sort of, frankly, evidence-free theorizing very much impacted the outlook of these detectives that suspected Jeremy. They essentially adopted the boot flower story wholesale.
Yeah.
Their theory was the boot flowers theory from day one, pretty much.
Yeah.
All of it was guesswork. I can't stress that enough. They were just guessing. They had no proof for any of these things. Some of the parts were borderline just nonsensical. One example is that Robert Bootflower. He imagined that Jeremy was, getting Sheila to come with him to the master bedroom where he'd shoot her. It's like he wakes her up sleepily from her bedroom to go into her parents' room to lie down and let him shoot her. Twice, by the way. That was their theory. So, he imagined that he coaxes Sheila from her room to what? Step over the dead body of her mother, lie down on the master bedroom near her mom's body, knowing that Jeremy had murdered at least her mother. And I don't know, she never fights back. She never flees. Nothing happens. It seems unusual to say. It's unusual behavior. She knows her two kids are in the next room. A mother would not just go with him, gunpoint or not. I think most moms would do something at that point to save their kids. She has to have known that they were in danger. So, and why would he even bring her into the master bedroom? Why would he not just shoot her in her bedroom? That makes no sense. So reverse that.
Well, the mother was already dead, right?
We think so.
We think so. Maybe that's why she came in there, because she heard him killing her mother.
The boot flowers and the prosecution say that he went and got her in her bedroom.
Well, that's
because remember they're also contending that there's a silencer on the gun, which silencers don't make silence, but they do muffle the sound significantly.
Correct, and there's. There could be voices. There could be. I would imagine there's going to be talking. But, was the father already killed?
Remember, she was her mom's body was in the doorway. Sheila was in the bedroom, so she steps over her mom's body and goes into the bedroom where she then
maybe she's looking for her dad.
Is murdered by. Where's Jeremy at this time?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's the thing. There are so many unknowns.
There are.
You can't say one way or the other.
You can't, but you can say that the prosecution's story is nonsensical.
Well, because they're just making stuff up.
Okay. That's pretty important.
I agree. Yeah.
I think. I would argue. Again, reverse that. If Sheila had committed suicide, wouldn't she have done it in her mom's room? It fits with that better than it does with murder. Her mother was the one she was mostly antagonistic to. She had the worst relationship by far with her mom. It just seems, this is me speculating too, for sure, but it just seems that given their tumultuous relationship, that seems like something she would do as more likely than Jeremy going and get her from her bedroom, bringing her into the master bedroom to then make her commit suicide or kill her in such a way, make her lie down and kill her and then make it look like she commits suicide.
Well, your argument is if she commits suicide, it would make sense for her to do it in the bedroom.
Exactly.
If he's trying to stage her suicide, and then maybe he's thinking exactly like you.
Well, I don't know. Maybe.
Because that's where her body was.
But it adds a layer of complication to his execution that's massive. You just shoot her in her room. You don't even wake her up.
Yeah, but we don't
Why
know.
would you wake her up?
We have no idea what transpired. Who says he woke her up?
Again, the prosecution says that.
Well, we know they don't know.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter what the prosecution says. I'm talking about reality.
Yeah, okay.
Nobody knows what happened.
No, we don't know. But it makes it's yours. The only way you get her from there and then be murdered is that she wakes up, she goes and checks on her mom and dad in their room. She steps over her mom's dead body to then be in the room when Jeremy springs out from nowhere and shoots her. And by the way, shoots her at point blank.
Another wrinkle. We don't really know the order of the deaths.
We don't for sure.
That's just the prosecution making a guess.
Yeah.
We don't know. Maybe he killed Sheila.
Yes.
Before he killed the mother.
She would have had to have been in. Well, she's lying down when she shoots herself, or is shot. Either way, she was lying down. Whether she was shot.
And how do we know that for sure?
The forensic people testified to that. Given the bullet and given the way the blood was on her pajamas, she had to have been lying down when she shot herself both times. So she's in her. For it to be murder, she's in. They're all three in the room. He makes her lie down, shoots her twice, and then starts shooting his parents.
Yeah.
I mean,
that doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense at all. So later, when Robert Bootflower had heard that Jeremy had gone windsurfing not long after the family's funeral, he tried to then fit this into his theorizing. He said, hey, maybe Jeremy wore a wetsuit when he committed the atrocity, and then he was washing the, quote, blood splashings into the ocean. That was that part of the Bootflower story. So he took the wetsuit with him windsurfing. Sure, of course you do that. Julia Mugford told investigators that Jeremy had borrowed that wetsuit from a friend, and that, but still, Robert wasn't listening. He made that part of his theory. So not only did the Bootflower story affect the police, it kind of seeped into the accusations told by Julia Mugford when that put Jeremy in jail. For instance, Julia had Jeremy tell her he had Sheila put the Bible on her chest. This is what Robert Bootflower had written and had told the police must have happened. In fact, it was not on her chest. It was at her side.
Yeah.
Julia Mugford's story also had Jeremy tell her that Jeremy had exited through the kitchen and used his mother's bicycle to and from the farm. This was 100% speculation from the Bootflowers. There's zero evidence that that's true. None whatsoever. No one saw him. There's no reason to think that he did that. It was just the family's initial speculation. Julia then has that be exactly what Jeremy told him he did. Very coincidental. There was never any positive evidence for this whatsoever. The police just accepted the Bootflower story, and Julia sort of parroted that story in her crucial accusations. Whether she got it from the Bootflowers, whether she got it from the police, or was it really what Jeremy told her? I don't know.
Yeah,
but it does make it suspicious.
Her motivation for lying is
we'll get to her in a minute.
Weird.
Let's talk about the motivation with the Bootflowers first before we get to her. So the Bootflowers were, dreaming up the story about Jeremy. But why were they doing this? Was it because they just wanted justice for Aunt Jane, which is what Aunt June, is what they said, or was there a more prosaic motive? We've kind of teased about that, but I'll get more specific now. Like many places, Britain had a law in place that prevented a murderer from inheriting money from his or her victims. So if Jeremy was essentially, he was the last Bamber, that meant if Jeremy could be convicted of their murder, the Bootflowers got everything.
Right. And
it was a lot. Annie and her husband, Peter, were in particular beneficiaries of Jeremy's conviction. They were deeply in debt at the time, and they were also highly desirous of a property that was owned by the Bambers called Little Renters. Neville had bought this 50-acre farm at Anne's urging, and they sort of had eyes on controlling that farm and running that farm and making money off that farm, essentially being the overseers of it.
Wait, I have a question.
Yes.
Sheila and her husband were not divorced yet, right?
They were divorced.
Oh, they were divorced.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he got nothing.
I thought they were in the process.
No. The Eatons also coveted a house called Vaulty. That was where June's very frail mother, Mabel Speakman, lived. She was June and of course Pamela, her sister, the Bootflower. So Mabel also still owned the farm where Pamela and Robert lived. The scions of the Bootflower lived in a farm owned by Mabel Speakman. Those two, Pamela and Robert, hoped to soon inherit their home as Mabel was near death.
Right.
Anne also not only wanted to earn money from running Little Renters, but she hoped to be given the house itself, Vaulty, when her grandmother passed away. Just a few weeks prior to the shooting, though, her grandmother Mabel, Anne's grandmother.
Oh, you said Pamela. Okay.
Oh, did I? So just a few weeks prior to the shooting, the Bootflowers and Eaton, their dreams were put in severe jeopardy. Jeremy had told his cousin Anne that his family was going to buy Vaulty from Mabel, the grandma, before she died, and that they would then do this with the proceeds of selling Little Renters. So not only, this was devastating to both Anne and her parents.
So he basically was saying, my parents are planning on screwing your family over because that's what they would be doing.
Yes and no. They were going to buy it with actual money. Neville Bamber owned, and his wife owned Little Renters. Anne and her husband had no claim on it whatsoever. They just hoped to gain control of it and use it as essentially as an income producing entity for them to kind of run it and earn an income from it.
Okay.
But they can't. There's no reason he shouldn't sell. This is an asset of his. He can sell if he wants to. Little Renters was an asset of Neville Bamber. And so they were
But
going to
so they were going to sell that to buy the home that Pamela was living in.
Yes. Oh, well.
That's shitty.
No. To buy the home that Mabel Speakman lived in that Pamela and her husband wanted to get. They thought they were going to inherit it from their grandma.
Okay.
So
I thought the home they were living in was owned by the grandma.
the farm, what was it? The farm where they, yes, it was, but it's a different property.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I have that right. I don't know.
Okay.
So this was
This is
just
so confusing.
It
but
is confusing,
Yeah.
but you think about it, this is like a family spat.
Yes.
And so the boot flowers now are just furious and
Yeah.
scared. Everything is coming up bad for them, and stormed home and scratched the wallpaper off of her bathroom wall. She later told the police, quote, "What Jeremy told me was a threat." Now, he may have been, because we know one thing, Jeremy was an asshole. So he's like, hey, guess what, Anne?
Yeah.
My mom, I can see him doing something like that. But so they were, now their whole future was jeopardized by what the Bambers were going to do. When Jeremy became the heir to June and Neville's fortune after their deaths, which he was, Robert, they're panicked now.
Yeah.
Now the person they don't like and doesn't like them, I think, is in control of all these assets. He probably, his own home was in jeopardy of going away. So remember how worried they were when Jeremy told them he would need to sell possessions for the inheritance tax. Remember, he said that not long after his parents died. That possessions could have easily been where they lived, and little renters, and so everything that was in the name of the Bambers already.
Yeah.
Robert convinced his alien mother-in-law to cut Jeremy out of her will not long before she died, so he would not get Vaulty. But Jeremy was still June and Neville's heir, so he'd have everything else, including little renters.
Yeah.
So getting him convicted was a hugely important for them, let alone the fact that it gave them everything.
Yeah.
Instead, with Jeremy convicted, in no small part, because of their actions, they got it all.
I have another question.
Yes.
If the matriarch, Mabel, is still alive.
She died. She died very soon after this.
She was still alive.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I know she's not alive now, Dean. Why did...
Cut that and start over because that's go ahead.
If the matriarch Mabel is still alive at this point, why did June inherit everything? Why do June and Neville have White House Farm? Didn't they inherit it at some? I thought
No, they were given it. They were given it by the Speakmans, by June's
parents.
June's parents, yes, they were given White House Farm. Yeah.
Oh, so it wasn't
Outright.
inherited.
I guess it was, but it was sort of gifted to them sometime after their marriage.
Wow.
It was nice.
I mean, I don't blame Pamela for being bitter.
There probably was a little bit.
A little bit?
Inter-family,
Huge.
Yeah, I suppose.
That doesn't make any sense.
I don't think Neville brought a whole lot of money into the relationship, so I don't think he could have bought it. Quote unquote. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure. I remember reading that. I think they were gifted the White House Farm, and it was a very profitable farm.
Yeah. And Pamela and her husband were gifted nothing?
No, I mean they had co-ownership of other assets as well, and like I said, they assumed they're going to inherit Vaulty, another very valuable. Where Mabel still lived there.
Yeah.
Though. She didn't live at White House Farm, so that could have been wise. Like, oh, don't worry, you'll get Vaulty. They'll get.
But you
White
make
House
it
Farm.
sound
I
like
don't know.
they don't even own where they live.
Mabel did, so for whatever reason she didn't gift them that. I don't know. I don't know the whole family story here, Curry.
I mean, I'm bitter for them.
Okay.
I mean, seriously, think about this.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I hear you.
and then they find out Neville's planning on
Selling stuff? No.
purposely.
Yeah. No, not purposely. Not purposely.
Well, if he knows
Yeah.
that, then it's
Yes.
purpose.
Uh-huh.
Purposely.
So what's that motivation for? Making sure their son gets convicted of murder and get everything?
Sure, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
They even the Boot Flowers took June's diamond and sapphire engagement ring that Jeremy said his mother would have wanted to have been cremated with. So she's cremated. But during the autopsy, they removed this ring and somehow it found its way into possession of the Boot Flowers. This was unknown to Jeremy until well after his mother was cremated.
Yeah.
So could that have been their allies in the police force who got that ring to them? That's what I would think. So I don't know. It's just a little bit, I don't know. We're getting probably too much into that. I think.
I mean, that's who gives a shit.
Here's the key, though. The jury was never told about any of this. They had no idea there was these antagonisms going on. They had
Yeah.
no idea that the direct monetary beneficiaries of Jeremy getting convicted were the boot flyers.
Right.
Never told that.
Yeah.
That's the key point to keep in mind. So let's turn to Sheila. It does appear that Sheila had some experience with guns, counter to what the police had said. It wasn't only Jeremy, by the way, who said so. Sheila had gone on a 3-day shooting trip with her uncle David Bootflower, where she had indeed fired rifles during, and she'd even gone on another shooting party with Peter Eaton, her cousin's husband, also a member of that Bootflower clan. So even they knew that she had experience with guns. Robert Bootflower would continually say, "Oh, she couldn't possibly have handled a weapon." They knew full well she could and did.
Yeah.
So that was an important part of the prosecution case. It really was, saying, "Oh, she didn't know anything about guns. How could she have done this?"
Yeah.
Well, she did, and she could have. I mean, certainly you can load, point, and pull the trigger. The 22 Anschutz rifle is not a very powerful weapon. 22s there's not a lot of kick to them. She would have been perfectly physically capable of shooting that weapon, no question whatsoever. Despite this, during the trial, the judge told the jury there was, quote, no evidence at all, unquote, that Sheila, quote, was used to loading and firing guns, unquote. Something absolutely contradicted by the facts.
It would seem like if this was in the United States, they could get a mistrial what the judge was doing.
It's insane what his...
Yeah.
So it's crazy. All of the shots were within a few feet at most. Many of them were point blank, or even contact wounds, which undoubtedly were fired almost certainly after first wounding from feet away. So in very likelihood that the attacker shot from 2, 3, 4, 5 feet away, and then those closer shots, because they were all shot multiple times, were after the victim had been wounded already, in all likelihood. So a frail female could have very easily done that. The injuries to June and Neville, moreover, were poorly aimed. Think about it. They were shot multiple times. And remember Neville, he had like his jaw and things like that. They were not well aimed. And some of them were very close. In fact, all of them were very close. Some even point blank, and they still weren't well aimed for the most part. This does not imply the actions of someone skilled with a weapon. And Jeremy was very used to firing rifles. What's her name? Sheila was much less familiar with rifles, but she did have some experience. It really does sort of, again, that's sort of just using logic as opposed to positive evidence, but it does indicate someone who could handle a rifle basically, but wasn't very good at it. And that fits much, much better fits Sheila than it does Jeremy. Mm-hmm. But Sheila was a slim woman, so could she have done battle with her father? Is another point. Remember? Yeah. Oh, she couldn't have done that and still maintain control of the rifle. If they're fighting for it, he would have got it from her.
Pretty easily, I would think, too.
I mean, Neville was a very healthy man. He could have easily overpowered his daughter if he had not already been shot 4 times upstairs in the bedroom and left for dead. That just completely destroys the prosecution argument that he was shot 4 times. Forensic people said he was shot 4 times upstairs. He came downstairs, did battle with his attacker, and shot 4 more times, and that killed him. So he gets shot 4 times. He's, like I said, he's almost certainly left for dead up there by his attacker. He struggles down to the kitchen where he likely surprised his assailant and then fought for his life trying to get control of that rifle, and he's not able to. So the injuries to his forearms, by the way, Neville's forearms indicate that he did sort of battle with his attacker, but that he was struck by the rifle against his arms. That's the prosecution, defense, everybody agrees on that. Yeah. So what you have is kind of a slim woman in a murderous rage fighting with a rifle, but
an injured
against
person.
A badly injured person who's bleeding profusely. Yeah. And that begins to... The logic of that is that, of course, she could have done that. Mm-hmm. Now, about that murderous rage, and this is important when we're talking about Sheila. Sheila, without question, suffered from severe mental illness. There's just no way. Remember, the prosecution had Dr. Ferguson talk about, oh, no, she was fine at the time. She had weird. Horrific bouts of severe mental illness and serious delusions and divorce from morality for sure. The so-called expert witness testimony that she did not have any suicidal thoughts and would never have harmed her children is directly contradicted by her mental health history. She had overtly warned that she felt exactly those things, anger toward her children and self-harm. So, and the kind of urges to harm her children. So that was just a utterly dishonest testimony for sure. She also despised her adopted mother. She was in the process of losing possibly the children that she both loved and feared, and had some really strange thoughts about, because it had to have dawned on her by this time that Colin had essential cell custody for months at this point. Her parents are now talking about sending them to daycare when she does have control of the kids. She probably sensed she was going to lose her children forever. I speculation on my part, but it does fit with what was happening at the time. I mean, Colin was just a hearing away, given her mental health history, and what she had said and done. It couldn't have been harm for him to have got full custody of his kids. Dr. Hugh Ferguson, who was Sheila's psychiatrist, remember, he testified that Sheila could not have been killed. He testified that Sheila could not have been the killer. Let me start that again. Dr. Hugh Ferguson, Sheila's psychiatrist, his testimony that Sheila, couldn't have done it. That's just, what is that, you think? That's ass covering. That is,
oh, yeah.
For sure.
Well,
it's contradicted by his own records of her mental illness.
I suppose so, but I don't think you can hold mental health care professionals responsible for their patients doing horrible things.
Hold on.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, unless they
trust me, you don't want to finish that sentence.
Unless they said they were going to.
Well, it is all a history of him. So I'll tell you a minute. Defense produced multiple witnesses who said Sheila was breaking down again right in the period leading up to the killings. And he's a psychiatrist. He would have known about this. One farm worker had seen Sheila on the day of the killings, and he talked to the police, and he described her as, quote, walking stiffly like a zombie from a horror film, unquote. Remember, we also had all of his friends said she had been acting very strange lately, and it was getting worse. Sheila had then conned, as you recall, Dr. Ferguson into giving her half a dose of the antipsychotic drugs not long before the murders.
Yeah.
So, he is feeling very culpable here. He could be open to blame and recrimination, and he knew it. So the argument is he fashioned his testimony to absolve Sheila. If she didn't do it and he's on Team Jeremy, then he skates on this.
Yeah.
Ferguson, by the way, was also involved in another case where his actions almost certainly led to, ironically enough, a mass shooting. Or at the very least, he allowed it to happen. I'll give you a quick detail. Paul Paget Lewis was a teacher who was stalking one of his young male pupils. He was apparently in love with him. Dr. Ferguson, examined Paget Lewis, and his conclusion was that the teacher was mentally sound and should retain his position at that school with that child. Paget Lewis responded by hurling a brick through the boy's house and slashing the tires of that boy's father's car. So he goes in for another session with Dr. Ferguson. Dr. Ferguson's recommendation for that was that Paget Lewis should be transferred to another school, but still allowed to teach young boys.
Well, wait.
Hold on.
Okay.
Paget Lewis responded to this by shooting 4 people at that boy's school, killing the boy's father and the son of the school's deputy headmaster. When he was arrested after this mass shooting, Paget Lewis asked the police, quote, "Why didn't you stop me before I did it? I gave all the warnings. I gave all the warning signs," end quote. That was Dr. Ferguson who did that.
Yeah.
Like 2 years later. So there's a history.
Wait, this happened after the White House
you know what?
murders?
That's a great question. It must. You know what? I didn't write down the dates. It might have happened before. I'm not positive. It might have happened before. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that also sounds like a terrible system.
It's a terrible system and a terrible doctor.
Why does what the psychiatrist says have any bearing on what the school does
but think about
his employment?
I don't know what
he
what
should
he
have
was.
been fired immediately.
But that
doesn't mean he's not going to do something horrible, but
But for sure. Yeah, no question. So Dr. Ferguson has a history of making terrible decisions. So when his testimony again was important.
Yeah.
That Sheila couldn't have done it.
Yes.
And it's utterly worthless. There's no question that Sheila was absolutely capable of doing this, and that logic tells you. But again, remember the initial thought was the police is like, okay, yeah, she did it.
Yeah.
She had a history of mental illness. She's right there. It looks like she committed suicide. This is a murder-suicide, and they were convinced of it. Even and most of the police were convinced of this until Julia Mugford came with her story. So let's talk about Julia Mugford's story. She's another key player who, like Dr. Ferguson, is also worthy of scrutiny. That she was Jeremy's girlfriend at the time, and her story has him telling her everything about murdering his family was really the only reason that Jeremy was ever arrested. Remember, he was done.
Right.
The boot flyers had told the story to a couple of cops that believed them. They had a review. The review said, nope, murder-suicide. Then Julia comes forward and says, guess what? Jeremy told me he did it all. So just logically, there's always the question of, would someone planning to murder their entire family tell his volatile girlfriend all of his horrific plans for a year prior to doing the act? And then, right after it's done, give this volatile girlfriend, who he's going to break up with shortly and had on and again, off again relationship with, all the details about what he had done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just... It wasn't like it was some drunken confession. He had been talking about it for over a year and told her quite calmly, complete sobriety, what he had done in every detail, according to her.
Yeah. The telling her afterward, I don't know, but telling people beforehand, yeah, we've heard that plenty of times.
Would you, though, with someone, they did not have a great relationship. They had been broken up off and on. Why? I mean, you don't, I mean, that person you're likely to break up with again now has a murder rap hold of your head?
Yeah. I mean,
that's crazy.
Yeah. I don't think he would have broken up with her if he was telling her all that stuff. But, but saying that no person would ever do that.
I'm not saying no person would do it. I'm saying it's illogical.
People have.
Of course people have. It's still incredibly illogical and uncommon.
Again,
Yeah. And telling her afterwards is even worse.
Yeah.
And fairly ludicrous. Julia said that he had called her the night of the morning murders, so the night before, and told her of his impending plans. And then again, remember, he supposedly called her during the act from the farmhouse. Remember that, hey, everything's going great. I mean, this is not, you have to understand, it's not like you're telling your co-conspirator, you're telling your girlfriend has you have a pretty violent and tumultuous relationship with. And remember, this is also after she had claimed, she was so shocked the first time he said it. He told, don't talk about it. But now he's given her details in real time that it doesn't add up. And then one last time, again, when she got to the farm, remember, so he had just brutally murdered his family. He's there. She came to the farm during the standoff, and he supposedly pulled her aside and said that he bragged about, he should have been an actor. It just doesn't ring true, but it sure sounds good when you're telling that to a jury.
Yeah.
Julia never goes to the police in the year preceding the murders, of course, and then she waits another month to tell them, which just happens to be coincidentally 3 days after Jeremy broke off their relationship. She claimed to have been scared of him, but what changed in that? Why was it different 3 days after he broke up with her? Why was she suddenly not scared of him anymore? So she goes to the police only after he breaks up with her. That doesn't jibe. She's afraid of him for a year, and then she's not afraid of him 3 days after he breaks up with her. Doesn't make sense. There was then the way her story jibed with the Boot Flyers version of events. That's a little suspicious as well.
That's the most suspicious part.
It's very suspicious, yeah. For instance, that Jeremy had taken his mother's bike to get back to the farm and home again secretly. That's completely it's a stupid plan, but it's what the Boot Flyers said, so it's what Julia said he said. Uh-huh. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. Why? Just drive. No one's going to see you. The bike ride is going to be much, much longer than a car ride there.
Well, that's what I thought all along.
Of course. That's pure logic. Yeah. Well, you're going to map out these byways so you can pedal your bike there? No, you're going to be on the road for 4 minutes in your car at 2 a.m. You can even take side streets there, I imagine. I don't know, but it's a silly idea that they took the bike. The whole thing was invented by the Boot Flyers. Again, there's zero evidence that's what happened.
My mental picture of this is very rural.
It's pretty rural, yeah.
Like
it's kind of farm country.
You're not going down a residential street with lots of houses and
I don't think. Yeah, that's my
stores.
Picture of that. I've seen it in satellite and certainly around the farm. It's kind of farm country.
There isn't going to be any CCTV.
Nope. So there's no reason for him not to. If he's going to do it, he takes the car for sure.
Yeah.
It was just the Boot Flyers. My suspicion is because when Ann Eaton saw the mom's bike at his house, she goes, and she told her dad, and they wrote it in their diaries. There were holes in Julia's story as well. She claimed the Bible, again, was on Sheila's chest. He was actually at her side. The biggest hole, though, was that hitman. We just forgot about that plumber hitman that she initially blamed. Only when we find out he has a rock-solid alibi does that go away. And the police appear to have simply let Julia kind of have a pass.
Yeah.
And they switched to blaming Jeremy as having committed the murders himself. So essentially, they catch her in a fundamental lie. If they're doing their job, it's like, hey, you said something that we now know is not true. They should be probing her story more. No, they just say, hey, switch it to Jeremy, and they go on and they effectively believe every other part of her story, other than this part that she's just proven to be not true.
Yeah.
So Julia also said that Neville had been shot 7 times instead of the 8 times he was. This point had been misreported in the newspapers.
Oh, I see.
And and so the implication being she got that from the newspaper.
Yeah.
And in fact, he was not shot 7, he was shot 8.
Yeah.
She also had Jeremy shooting June in her bed. It's not true. His mother had been on her feet. He shot her in the doorway, or she was shot in the doorway. Does he get that wrong when he tells her, or did she just not know? And
right.
So much was made during the trial that Julia had not profited from her testimony. They actually made a point of that. Oh, she's not done anything. She's not doing this for any. She's not motivated at all. Sort of proof of her honesty, the prosecution said. The day after the trial, she sold her story to the News of the World tabloid for £25,000, equivalent to almost $100,000 in today's money.
Wow.
So the day after, if you think that wasn't in place for months, you're nuts. Of course it was.
Well, I was assuming maybe the boot flowers promised or something.
That's a very, remember, they're getting a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's also a possibility as well. I don't know the answer to that. That would not surprise me either.
Yeah.
But she certainly profited from it tremendously. So the day after, just wait 5 days.
Yeah.
And prior to the trial, the prosecution recommended that Julia not be prosecuted for her check fraud or her role in the caravan burglary and, coincidentally, some light weed dealing she had been up to. So she had multiple crimes. They said a pass on all of it.
Yeah.
They got her out of all of it. If that's not a motivation, I don't know what is. I mean, that's a deal.
Yeah.
That's your deal. And they advertised her as being super honest and no deals.
Yeah.
And the check fraud was the most important one, by the way. And that got dropped by the bank. The bank said, oh, no, the bank was the victim. They said, no, we're not going to prosecute. The bank manager would later note that Detective Stan Jones had personally escorted and was in the room with Julia when she begged the bank for leniency. That would have been a pretty intimidating presence for the bank. So there's a few other holes in the prosecution story. I'll go over them quickly. There was Jeremy, how did Jeremy discover that the rifle with the silencer on would not work for his frame-up of Sheila? I mean, how does that work exactly? How does he realize he's got to take the silencer off?
Because he's holding it under her chin or where.
So he holds it under her chin and shoots her twice. So
no, but
he's holding it.
He can see where her hand is.
Really? It's a few inches. It's a few inches. You can really measure and go, oh, shit, I don't know. It's possible that maybe when he was trying to frame her and put her hands on it, he realized then. That's possible. Yeah. Sure. But,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
It does make is possible. But, again, you then have to have him go and put the silencer in the cupboard, which I think is ludicrous. The police said Neville's called Jeremy that his sister had gone mad and was absolutely fiction. That's pure speculation. We don't know that. They can't prove that. They just asserted it effectively.
Yeah. It'd be nice if England had better phone technology.
Goddamn it, England. 1985, Gary.
Hey, I lived through 1985.
Yes.
We got a bill every month that
it.
listed every phone call.
You sound angry towards British Telecom.
We sent
right
and received. So
you have a beef with British Telecom from 1985?
Yes, I do.
Okay. The prosecution said that Neville would have been too injured to make that phone call. If this is true, then he would have been too injured to get downstairs and fight with his attacker as well, wouldn't he have been? So there's just some contradictions in their story. Oh, the lack of blood on the phone, by the way, that they said was, kind of damning, as Neville would have been bloodied. He could have called Jeremy before there was any shots fired, couldn't he?
Yeah.
It could have been before. She had got the gun. She was threatened. She was in the process of threatening, like, your sister's gone mad.
Yeah.
She may have the gun in her hand and she's, talking crazy. And then he calls his son, and then the cutoff is when she may have shot him. By the way, we don't know where that. Remember, they had a telephone in the master bedroom. They had him downstairs as well. It's not clear where that call, Jeremy's the call Jeremy claimed his father made was made from.
Well,
we
they're
just don't know.
assuming it's the phone that was left off the hook.
Which was in the kitchen. It's true.
Yeah.
That is most likely, but it's not positive.
Yeah.
She could have put that off the hook and then hung up the master bedroom phone. You know, or she could have even, what's possible is that she was listening to the phone in the kitchen and dropped it and then went up and shot her dad. And that's why he suddenly went dead. And then she hangs up the master bedroom phone, and the phone in the kitchen downstairs is still off the hook, which we know it was. That's total speculation, but logical.
Yeah.
So the blood in the phone thing doesn't really mean anything. There's also the fact that it's unclear if Neville also had called the police. Remember, there's another record that seems to indicate that Neville had called the police, not just his son. The prosecution made much of Jeremy not calling 999. But when you know the family history, that's not super unusual. Jeremy would later say, quote, "People don't understand that Dad, Mom, and I had been looking after Sheila since she was about 18, managing her schizophrenic episodes. So when Dad rang, it didn't shock me that Sheila had flipped," unquote. So it's not like she's killing everyone. It's that, she's screaming and she's having another one of her episodes. So he doesn't feel this urgency to call 999 right away.
Yeah.
There's also the uncertainty centering on when exactly did Sheila die. If Jeremy had shot her, it would have been at the same time he shot 3:30 in the morning when he shot the rest of the family, hours before their bodies were examined by police and forensics. Here's the key. A photograph taken at 9 a.m. by the police shows that Sheila's blood was still wet. At least this is what a later defense expert, a photographic expert, would testify. That blood, I argue, looks wet. It was taken on this picture taken at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
2 other officers on the scene reported, quote, "blood leaking from both corners of her mouth," end quote. So we have 3 different points of evidence that indicate Sheila was fairly recently killed, not killed 5.5 hours before that photograph was taken, and probably, almost 5 hours before they really started examining the bodies. So that's certainly the defense indicated that she had shot herself during the standoff when we know
the police were still there.
Jeremy was there.
Back
with the police.
to Jeremy finally calling 999.
Uh-huh.
If he didn't, what changed for him?
He didn't call 999. He called. Remember, he called the direct line. He looked up the phone number to the local police and called that.
Oh, that's right. Why did he call at all?
But probably just, my sister's going crazy. I think his dad said she's got the rifle, but he's not thinking she's going to shoot people. He thinks she's just threatening. So let's get the police there and calm her down and get her back in the institution.
Okay.
Is all that actually makes perfect sense. And there were big wigs in the family, and they had this person within the family who was, mentally unstable for sure, and was probably to them of an embarrassment. It's a scandal, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So back to the standoff, though, in the blood, to the defense, again, indicates that she was alive when the standoff started. One officer did indeed thought he saw a shadow move by the upstairs master bedroom window early on. I think just initially after they had gotten there, they thought Sheila had shot herself in the kitchen. The defense did, by the way. And then when she realizes the police are coming in, probably they start. Remember, it took them 24 minutes for whatever reason to batten down the door. Apparently, I don't know how. I'm not sure exactly how long that took to actually knock the door down. But she must have realized. She hears footsteps. She realizes that okay, they're coming in. She's going to kill herself now. That she had shot herself once in the kitchen. Remember, the first shot didn't work, and so she went upstairs and shot herself again. I don't know why the defense makes that argument. Why wouldn't she have just gone upstairs and shot herself there? But that makes way more sense to me.
But if the police were there, why wouldn't they have heard it?
That's a phenomenal question. I don't know. It's odd that the police didn't report hearing 2 shots. But let's remember this. We don't know exactly if she did this. We don't know when she did it. Exactly. It could have been some time before they got. So remember, they're set up in the base camp in the back of the house, and not I don't know if it's 100 yards or what it was, but not right there. It's a barn that's behind the house. The master bedroom is at the front of this house, which remember is a very large house. So she goes up.
Still hear a gunshot.
You would think, but it's a 22. That's not a very powerful weapon.
Yeah.
It's not a very loud report. So that's a fair question, but It's not implausible that they're still by the barn, and she shoots herself in the back, and the house. She shoots herself in the front of the house in the master bedroom, lying down next to the bed. In the bed.
Does anybody touch any bodies? Feel for any pulse? Because then it would be.
Yeah.
If it was that quick, her body's not, she wouldn't even be cold yet.
I don't know. And again, it could have been.
I mean, that's just bad.
Certainly, forensic people said if she had killed herself at 3:30, or I'm sorry, if she had been murdered at 3:30 with Jeremy, her blood would be long congealed by 9 a.m.
Yeah.
So, but it could have been 6:30, 6 o'clock, an hour or 2 hours before they broke in. And so, in which case, she's colder and she's clearly dead.
Yeah. Well, but then a lot of the stuff that you said doesn't match.
Like what?
Like somebody seeing a shadow.
Well, that was when they first got there, 3:30ish, something like that. Someone saw a shadow in the
okay.
Shortly after they first got there.
Okay.
I mean, but it still would match because she could have been walking around for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So, also, but speaking about how the police handled this crime scene, there's all kinds of holes in that. From photos, it's clear that Sheila's body and the rifle had been moved. They have photos, they have descriptions of photos that just don't match. So the defense would say it's clearly, essentially, the officers kind of almost quote unquote recreated the crime scene in a sense.
Well, and my immediate reaction to that is they just assumed it was
correct
murder suicide, so they didn't. Like not
Fair.
thinking we need to investigate this as a possible homicide.
Fair
is what I'm thinking.
But at the trial, they did not give the defense those photographs that indicated they had moved the body.
Oh.
That's a little nefarious.
Yeah.
The later defense team also hired a forensic photographic expert to look at pictures of the scratch marks on the mantelpiece where the silencer had allegedly picked up those red paint flecks. That expert, his name was Peter Suthurst, he testified that there was no scratch marks on the hearth mantle in pictures from the original investigation. They did indeed take pictures of that mantelpiece, and his testimony was that my close examination of those photographs showed no scratch marks. He then examined photographs taken 34 days later. Voila, there are suddenly scratch marks on that later picture. His conclusion was fairly obvious. He thought the marks on the mantle had been created after the original crime.
Right.
We know the police had, I believe, taken the silencer to the farm several days after the event.
Was that introduced during the trial?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
A lot was not introduced during the trial.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a defense expert. So again, but
right.
I mean, often defense experts.
But I mean, if there are pictures and you can show them to the jury, that would be meaningful.
Most defense experts aren't, they're making a paycheck.
Yeah.
I'm very distrusting of defense experts, but the pictures speak for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the case favor of Jeremy. In the U.S. legal system, criminal trials are tried on the grounds that the prosecution has to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's critical because it doesn't mean any remotely plausible lie that defense lawyers often try to make that out to mean. It doesn't mean creating just a tiniest shred of a shadow of a doubt, but it means beyond a reasonable doubt. But it does put the onus squarely on the prosecution. In civil cases, though, the jury is directed to judge which side has brought forth a preponderance of evidence. There's a sense of quality of the evidence. You should weigh it. DNA evidence is stronger than eyewitness evidence, for example. But still, it's kind of like, where does the evidence lie? Which side is there a clear preponderance of evidence, and that side usually wins. So even let's just look at that in that sense, though. Let's look at sort of this preponderance. So briefly, in favor of the prosecution against Jeremy Bamber, we have what? Sheila was very clean. She didn't have blood on her. They didn't find any bloody nightgown or anything like that from Sheila. Sheila allegedly had no gun skills. The rifle was very hard to reload. Could she have reloaded it? Sheila could not have fought her father. Jeremy took too long to call the police, and then he didn't dial 999. Sheila's blood was on the silencer. Then you have all of Julia Mugford's allegation, and you also have Jeremy was a big giant asshole. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, that clearly had something to do with it.
Sure.
He was all over the press. There's no question those 12 jurors had heard and read of him in the press, and he was, he didn't look good.
Yeah.
Now the points that favor Jeremy. Neville possibly called the police, not just Jeremy, that early morning.
You mean, what do you mean favor Jeremy? As being innocent or guilty? Okay.
Innocent. So you have Neville possibly having called the police. You have the fact that a call may have come from the farmhouse at 6:09 a.m. You have the lack of blood on the phone, because I would argue Jeremy would have been bloody, and the lack of blood actually, I think, argues in favor of him. You have the blood on that silencer, which is absolutely critical, being incredibly uncertain and should have been given next to no weight whatsoever. You have the silencer also be mishandled by the police. Remember, he didn't put it in the evidence lockup. He had you have the quote discovery of the silencer by the boot flowers of all people. You have the silencer then in the possession of the boot flowers for days, and we know their motivation. You have it unclear how that red paint got on the silencer, or even what it means. For instance, it's just the boot flowers theorizing that they had this fight. I guess they do have. It was very likely from the evidence of Neville's injuries that he did have a fight over the gun, but there's no reason to think the mantelpiece was involved in that fight whatsoever. That was the boot flowers, and then later they quote unquote find this red paint. You have the role of the boot flowers story being so clearly impactful what the police thought happened, and then you have the boot flowers' clear vested motives. You have Sheila's her mental illness and her threats to her children, arguing massively in favor of her being the murderer, not Jeremy. You have Sheila's animosity toward her mother, who she died right next to. You have the threats to custody of the children as kind of an immediate instigative motive for Sheila at the time. You have that Sheila did indeed know how to handle a gun, and that the contrary statements were dishonest. You have that Sheila could have fought with a badly wounded Neville. So again, you poke holes in that prosecution statement. You have Julia's story being incredibly suspicious and suspect, and also internally contradictory, and also contradictory of the known facts that were learned later on.
Yeah.
And then finally you have just those various holes in the prosecution case, the most important one being that Sheila's blood evidence indicates that she may have been alive at some point for the first part of the standoff. In fact, she was likely alive for the first part of the standoff. Two things ultimately convicted Jeremy Bamber. That was the blood evidence in the silencer and Julia's story, for sure. I would argue that, at the very least, the silencer evidence is suspect. It was in control of Jeremy's enemies, and her actively working.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous that it was allowed.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
So, and it was mishandled by police, et cetera, et cetera. Stored in a drawer, taken to the farmhouse with the boot flowers present, discovered by the boot flowers in a very suspicious way where they staged a witness there. There's just so many problems with the silencer evidence. And that, again, that's the only positive physical evidence that Sheila was murdered, not committed suicide.
I'm assuming they have the same rules of evidence that we do.
Probably similar.
How would that even have been allowed? I think the rules of evidence existed in 1985 too.
Yeah, you would think.
Certainly there's reasonable doubt.
For sure. Well, sure. Well, hold on. And add to this the certainty of the blood being Sheila's is actually highly, highly suspect. We don't know if it was her blood, if it was a mixture of blood, or what it was. So you combine these lines of reasoning, at the very least, it seriously impugns the silencer evidence, if not just demolishes it. Then we have Julia Mugford's story. That was the other item that really got him convicted. And I won't go into the details, but as we just heard, it was highly questionable, very likely a complete fabrication. So if you even weaken these two pieces of evidence, you don't really have much left.
No.
But none of this is to say that Jeremy did not do it.
Right.
It just means that the police and prosecution did not have the evidence honestly, to even put him at the top of the suspect list, let alone charge him, let alone convict him.
Well, he's at the top of the suspect list because of who he is.
I suppose, but who's at the top of the suspect list?
Sheila.
Of course.
I think they both are. And the fact that she could fire a gun is not evidence that she did
it's so
anything.
much more than that Sheila did it.
But no, I understand that. But you're rattling off all these things.
Yes,
and
I am. But those things directly contradict the first set of Jeremy did it, are contradicted pretty decisively by those items in the Jeremy did not do it column. That's why I mentioned that. So, the prosecution says she was too weak to fight with her father. We clearly know that was not true.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
All of them have massive holes. Everything the prosecution said has holes are directly contradicted.
Yeah, it's just kind of a shame that the police didn't do an actual good job
Yeah.
of even investigating the murder-suicide
Yeah.
at the beginning.
That's true. They made the assumption right away.
Yeah.
But still, you couple all this with I would argue, the vastly more likely culprit, and that's Sheila.
Yeah.
And at least you reach the conclusion that Jeremy was probably falsely convicted, but probably.
Yeah.
This was basically a directed verdict from a hopelessly biased and frankly dishonest judge, that Sheila had never shot a gun, that Julia's story was enough to convict. He said that. The Judge Drake did. That it had to be Sheila's blood on the silencer, which he implied to the jury, that withholding the photographic evidence, the highly suspicious handling of all the evidence, and the poor forensic treatment of the crime scene, all those things, the judge just poo-pooed or directed to the jury that they should convict. It was a summation that Judge Drake delivered. It was more like the prosecution argument, clearly implying how they were expected to find. Every member of that jury then had to, you think about that. This is the most notorious murder case in modern British history. This person's a monster. He's been vilified in the press already. Are you going to be the person who stands up? Two people did stand up and say, no, he's not guilty, but they couldn't get a third. It would have been overwhelming pressure to vote, especially after the judge's summations, to vote to convict.
And juries tend to really respect judges.
Later on, the jury foreman told a police officer, quote, "It was only the judge's summing up," end quote, that convinced them to convict Jeremy.
That I believe 100% that's
so, and they were asking the right
why
questions. Are we sure it was Julia's blood? The judge says, yes, we are, essentially. And then he does his summation, this insanely biased summation.
How does he not get a new trial based on that? That's weird.
So the appeals process for Jeremy has been a Kafkaesque nightmare.
Yeah.
The initial appeal from Bamber was dismissed by a guy named Geoffrey Lane. He would later be the Lord Chief Justice of England, so a bigwig, a very famous jurist within English law. He was the same judge who tossed an appeal by the infamous Birmingham Six. That was a group of Northern Irish men who were falsely convicted of a series of pub bombings. So they would later be exonerated, but Judge Lane, the guy who dismissed Jeremy's initial appeal, was that same judge. Judge Maurice Drake, the judge who oversaw the trial of Jeremy and Bamber, was involved in another notorious case. It was called the Bridgewater case. There, he quashed an appeal in 1989 for the 4 defendants in the murder of a paperboy who were in 1997 were exonerated. Mm-hmm. The major point of their exoneration in 1997 was that the police had fabricated evidence.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Since his latest appeal was filed in 2021 by Jeremy Bamber, he's been appealing the whole entire time, but he had 9 grounds on which he based his 2021 final appeal to this board in England that supposedly is supposed to be an open hearing to appeals. That appeals court has reviewed 3 of those 9 grounds. That is 1 per year so far. By the time they are finished looking at the rest of the grounds, Jeremy Bamber will have been in jail for 45 years and will be nearly 70 years old. It'd be like 2030 before they're finished at this pace.
That is bizarre.
It's very bizarre. As a highly regarded judge, Lord Denning said in 1988, so he's a British judge, very regarded. In 1988, he said, quote, "It is better that some innocent men remain in jail than that the integrity of the English judicial system be impugned," end quote.
What?
There's a pattern to English justice, and the Bamber case fits right in.
Wow.
That's exactly what's been happening now for decades.
I mean, that happens here too.
If you want to, the article in the New Yorker about Heidi Blake goes into, it's almost more detail on the appeals than there is on the case, at least as much of the appeals process. And talking to Jeremy, she interviewed Jeremy multiple times. It's a horrific ordeal. There's no question the appeals process in Britain is designed to quash appeals because they don't want anyone to think there could be a miscarriage of justice in this hallowed British justice system.
Which is
just preposterous.
Ridiculous, because we know there are miscarriages of justice all the time.
But they still have the same attitude. It doesn't seem like they used to be. You know how we have the Innocence Project here, which I'm not a huge fan of.
I know,
but very often they do get things right and they exonerate innocent people. They tried that in England It lasted just a few years, and they essentially don't have any Innocence Project there any longer.
Really?
It's just you're beating your head against a wall. It's even harder there than it is here,
Wow.
where it's not easy at all.
Kind of surprising to me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Do they have the same kind of parole system that we do? Like you have to admit your crimes and
I don't know.
Show
Remorse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they have that or not.
And if you insist you're innocent, you're basically not ever going to get paroled.
I know. I understand the reason for that is because if you're not remorseful,
accepting responsibility,
but there's only and if the person is, I mean, what's worse than a murderer who gloats the family and won't accept and still lies about the person they murdered? That's a horrible person. That's a person who deserves, the ninth circle of hell. It's just so I get it.
Yeah.
But if you're wrong, and if that murderer really isn't the murderer, then it's a catch-22 to force that upon them.
It very much is. Yeah.
You really have to say, I did something I didn't do, something horrific.
Yes.
To be shown any leniency whatsoever. That it doesn't work if you're wrong.
Yeah.
Essentially. So.
And there are people who have stayed in prison for their entire lives because they weren't willing to.
Yeah.
To lie and say they did something they didn't do.
I know. But then I just go, we've seen it on or listened to it on Dateline podcasts, things like that, where there's just a monster who, no question whatsoever, raped, murdered some poor woman, and they, still they lie about their victim and say terrible things about their victim and still claiming their innocence, and that person's just a monster, and that person should be kept in jail. So I see it both ways. I get it, but So that is the White House farm murders.
Well, I'm going to say I don't know. I am going to say I don't know.
I thought you might,
because messing things up and the other family getting involved in it and lying, that's not evidence of his innocence.
It's not. But I think there's. I'm going to say, I mean, I've felt your team, Sheila, for the entire all 3 episodes. I think it's 99.9% that she did it.
If you had to put my thoughts on a scale, yes, it would tip toward Sheila being
for sure.
guilty.
Now your responses have been strongly indicative of wanting to believe Sheila's innocent.
Yes.
But wanting to believe Sheila's innocent.
Of course.
Sheila's almost certainly not innocent. I mean, her, the mental illness, the evidence,
No, I know.
the lack of any evidence. If you just dispassionately look at the evidence, I don't know. Jeremy sounds like a huge dick.
Yeah.
He's one of those things where you kind of want him to be guilty. But if you really look at the evidence, I think it's almost certain that she did it.
And all that stuff you said is what tips my scale.
Yeah.
But
well, you just said you still think that he did it, didn't you?
No.
Okay.
I said I don't know, and I think there's a possibility it could be either of them.
Okay.
But my scale is tipped to Sheila because it seems more likely that it's her.
I thought you meant in favor of Sheila. But you meant that she did it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I misunderstood what you said.
No. Yeah. Of her guilt.
Me too. But it's over. I have almost no doubt that she did. There's a like you said. There's a kernel of a doubt.
Yeah.
He was motivated too. So he was, kind of a
honestly. Everybody involved seems pretty icky except for the kids.
That's true. Colin seems like a good dad.
Well, sure.
Although he did
I'm not
multiple times cheat on her, so that's not great.
I'm not saying he's involved.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
But you're right. The boot flyers don't come off well. The Bambers don't come off great.
Yeah.
So it's not. But that shouldn't. It's still a horrific.
Well,
thing.
of course.
Okay. So a horrible thing. It's still a notorious case, especially in England. But and it's unlikely Jeremy will ever be free. Jeremy Bamber will be free, but he didn't do it.
Yeah, which is too bad. I don't think he should have been convicted.
No, he shouldn't. He shouldn't have had inherited a fortune either because he's a dick and he doesn't deserve it, but he shouldn't have been convicted for murders he did not commit. And be one of the most hated persons in England when he should have just been mildly despised. So that is the case of the White House farm murders of England. We, again, don't hope you enjoyed it, but hope you found it interesting, intriguing, and
you know what I found it?
Food for thought. Yes.
Frustrating.
Frustrating. It is. It is. But that's what we do here at the Word of the Podcast. Okay.
Thanks for
Until
listening.
next time. Bye.